Welcome to Monk's Temple. Let's begin with a question. It's simple, but if you sit with it for a moment, it might reveal more than you expect. When you sit down to be still, to meditate, to think, or simply to do nothing, what do you find? For most of us, the answer is not peace. It's not silence. It's noise. It's a crowd. It's a dozen different voices all speaking at once, each trying to convince you of something different. One voice says you should be working. Another says you deserve to rest. One voice reminds you of something someone said years ago, and you feel the old heat of anger rise. Another whispers about the future, about everything that could go wrong, and you feel a knot tighten in your stomach. And then there's the voice that just wants to know what's for dinner. This is the inner war. It's not a war between good and evil in some dramatic sense. It's a war between competing desires, competing shoulds, competing stories about who you are and what you need. And the battleground is your own mind. The Buddha spoke about this war. He didn't describe it in terms of devils and angels. He described it in terms of causes and effects, craving and clinging, heedfulness and its opposite, complacency. He said all unskillful qualities arise from a kind of carelessness, a lack of attention to what's actually going on inside. And all skillful qualities arise from their opposite, a quality he called appamada. It's often translated as heedfulness or non-complacency. When we hear the word heedfulness, we tend to think of it as a warning. Watch out. Danger ahead. Be careful. And that's part of it. But there's another side we don't often talk about. It's not just about avoiding danger. It's about recognizing opportunity. It's about seeing that in any given moment, even in a moment as small as one breath, you have the power to do something skillful. You have the power to choose a different voice to listen to. You have the power to negotiate with the committee in your head. Let's look at that committee more closely. Imagine you're the chairperson of a very disorganized meeting. Around the table are dozens of representatives, each with a strong opinion about what you should do next. One is the voice of duty. It tells you all the things you owe to others, to your job, to your family, to your reputation. It speaks in a firm, no-nonsense tone. It has a long list of tasks, and it's not shy about reminding you. Then there's the voice of desire. This one doesn't care about duty. It wants pleasure. It wants comfort. It wants the easy path. It whispers about how nice it would be to scroll through your phone, eat something sweet, avoid anything difficult. It's very persuasive because it speaks the language of immediate gratification. Then there's the voice of fear. This one is always scanning for threats. It remembers every past failure and projects it into the future. It says, if you try that, you'll fail. If you speak up, you'll be humiliated. If you trust someone, you'll be hurt. Its job is to keep you safe, but it does its job too well. It keeps you small. And then there are the voices of habit. The ones that just repeat whatever they've always said without any real thought. The ones that tell you you're not good enough, or that you're better than everyone else, or that nothing really matters anyway. In an ordinary mind, all these voices are shouting at once. And because they're all shouting, you can't hear any of them clearly. You just feel a kind of chaotic pressure. You react without thinking. You grab the phone. You eat the snack. You snap at someone. You worry. You procrastinate. You do all this without ever really choosing to do it. It's just the loudest voice winning for a moment, until another voice shouts louder. The practice of meditation, the practice of heedfulness, is about learning to chair this meeting skillfully. It's not about silencing all the voices. That's impossible, and it's not even desirable. Some of those voices have useful things to say. The voice of duty might remind you of genuine responsibilities. The voice of desire might alert you to genuine needs. The voice of fear might warn you of genuine dangers. The problem is not that they speak. The problem is that they speak without order, without context, without prioritization. So the first step is simply to notice that these voices are there. To step back from the shouting and observe it. This is why we start with the breath. The breath is neutral. It's always there. It's a steady, reliable anchor. When you focus on the breath, you're not trying to stop the voices. You're just giving yourself a place to stand. You're saying, I'm going to watch this meeting for a while, but I'm not going to jump into the argument. As you watch, you begin to notice patterns. You notice which voices shout the loudest. You notice which ones are most persuasive. You notice which ones leave you feeling worse after you listen to them. You begin to see that not every voice deserves your attention. This is where negotiation begins. The Buddha taught that the path to peace is not about repression. It's not about telling the voice of desire to shut up forever. That voice will just get louder if you ignore it. Instead, you have to learn how to address it skillfully. You have to offer it something better than what it's asking for. Let me tell you a story that might illustrate this. There was once a man who lived in a small village. He was a farmer, and he worked hard every day in his fields. But he had a problem. Every evening, when he came home from work, he would sit down to rest, and a monkey would appear at his window. The monkey would chatter and screech and make all kinds of noise. The man would shout at it, throw things at it, try to chase it away. But the monkey always came back. One day, a wise woman passed through the village. The man told her about his problem with the monkey. She listened, and then she said, "Tomorrow evening, when the monkey comes, don't shout at it. Don't throw things. Instead, take a piece of fruit and place it outside the window. Then go back to your rest." The man was skeptical, but he did as she said. The next evening, the monkey came. The man placed a piece of fruit outside the window. The monkey took it, ate it, and sat quietly for a while. Then it left. The next evening, the same thing happened. After a few weeks, the monkey stopped coming to the window altogether. It had found something better to do. This story is not about feeding your desires until they go away. It's about understanding that the mind's restless voices are often looking for something they're not getting. They're looking for satisfaction, for relief, for a kind of happiness. If you simply try to suppress them, they'll keep coming back. But if you can offer them a better kind of happiness, a happiness that doesn't cause harm, they'll eventually lose interest in the old, unskillful ones. This is why the Buddha taught the practice of concentration. Concentration is not just about focusing the mind. It's about generating a sense of well-being that you can offer to those restless voices. When you learn to make the breath comfortable, when you learn to fill the body with a sense of ease and energy, you're creating a kind of inner food. And when that food is available, the mind doesn't need to go looking for junk food. But this takes practice. It takes time. And it takes a certain kind of wisdom, the wisdom to know which voices to listen to and which to question. Let's talk about that wisdom for a moment. The Buddha called it yoniso manasikara, which means appropriate attention or wise reflection. It's the ability to look at a thought and ask, where is this coming from? Where is it leading? Is it helpful? Is it true? Most of the time, we don't ask these questions. We just believe whatever thought arises. If a thought says, "You're a failure," we feel like a failure. If a thought says, "That person wronged you," we feel anger. We don't stop to examine the thought itself. We just accept it as reality. But thoughts are not reality. They're just mental events. They arise and pass away, just like sounds or sensations. And like sounds or sensations, they can be observed without being believed. This is a radical shift in perspective. It's the difference between being in the movie and watching the movie. When you're in the movie, you're caught up in the drama. You're afraid when the villain appears. You're sad when the hero suffers. But when you're watching the movie, you can see it all as just light and sound. You can appreciate it without being emotionally manipulated. The mind's thoughts are like that. They're productions. They're put together by various voices in the committee. And if you can watch them without getting caught up, you begin to see how they're constructed. You see the raw material, a memory here, a fear there, a bit of desire, and you see how they're woven together into a story. And once you see that, you're no longer trapped by the story. Let me tell you another story. This one is about a weaver. There was once a woman who was known throughout her village for the beauty of her cloth. She could weave patterns that seemed to shift and change in the light. People came from far away to buy her work. But the woman had a secret. Every night, after she finished her weaving, she would look at the cloth and see flaws that no one else could see. She would stay up late, trying to fix them, but the flaws only seemed to multiply. She became exhausted, and her health began to suffer. One day, a monk came to the village. The woman told him about her problem. The monk asked to see her loom. She showed him. He looked at it carefully, and then he said, "Your loom is fine. Your threads are fine. The problem is not in your weaving. The problem is in your eyes. You're looking at the cloth in the wrong light. You need to learn to see it in the morning, when the sun is bright, instead of at night, when the shadows make everything look flawed." The woman realized that the monk was right. She had been examining her work at the worst possible time. When she started looking at it in the morning light, she saw that it was beautiful. She still made improvements, but she no longer tortured herself with imagined flaws. This story is about how we look at our own minds. Often, we examine our thoughts in the worst possible light. We look at them when we're tired, when we're anxious, when we're already caught up in the story. And in that light, everything looks like a flaw. But if we can learn to look at our thoughts from a place of calm, from the steady light of concentration, we see them more clearly. We see which ones are worth keeping and which ones can be let go. This is why the practice of meditation is sometimes described as learning to see the mind in a different light. You're not trying to change the thoughts directly. You're changing the conditions under which you observe them. And when the conditions are right, the thoughts themselves begin to change. So as we sit here together, consider your own inner committee. Which voices are shouting right now? Which ones are whispering? Which ones have you been believing without question? And what might it feel like to simply watch them for a while, without jumping in? You don't need to answer these questions right now. Just hold them lightly. Let them sit with you as you go about your day. Because the first step in any negotiation is simply showing up and listening. And that's exactly what we've begun to do today. Thank you for listening. In our next session, we'll explore how to actually negotiate with these voices, how to talk to them, how to offer them something better, and how to find a peace that isn't about silence, but about clarity. In our last time together, we sat with the inner committee. We observed the voices, duty, desire, fear, habit. All shouting at once, each trying to steer the ship of your attention. We talked about how the first step in any negotiation is simply showing up and listening, stepping back from the chaos to watch without immediately jumping in. But watching alone is not enough. At some point, you have to engage. You have to learn how to negotiate with these voices skillfully. Because if you don't, the loudest voice will always win, and that voice is rarely the wisest one. So today, we're going to talk about the art of negotiation. Not the kind of negotiation where you try to get the best deal from someone else, but the kind where you learn to talk to yourself in a way that leads to genuine peace. The Buddha gave us a framework for this negotiation. He called it the Four Noble Truths, but we can also think of them as 4 tasks, 4 things we need to do. First, we need to comprehend suffering, to really understand it, to see it clearly. Second, we need to abandon the cause of suffering, which is craving. Third, we need to realize the end of suffering. And fourth, we need to develop the path that leads to that end. These are the Buddha's shoulds. They're not commandments from on high. They're more like recommendations from a skilled physician. If you want to be free from suffering, this is what you need to do. But here's the challenge. You have other shoulds in your mind. You have shoulds from your parents, from your culture, from your own fears and desires. Some of these shoulds are helpful. Some are not. And you have to learn to sort them out. This is where wisdom comes in. The Buddha said that a measure of your wisdom lies in seeing that there are things you'd like to do but know will cause long-term suffering, and how well you can talk yourself out of wanting to do them. And conversely, things you don't like to do that will lead to long-term happiness. How well you can talk yourself into wanting to do them. Think about that for a moment. It's a very practical definition of wisdom. It's not about knowing a lot of facts or being able to recite scriptures. It's about having a kind of inner persuasive ability. It's about being able to negotiate with your own desires. Now, successful negotiation has a basic principle: everybody gets something. If someone's at the table, you don't want them to walk away empty-handed. Otherwise, they'll rebel. They'll find a way to sabotage the agreement. This is true of the inner committee as well. One of the most persistent voices is the one that says, "I want happiness right now. I don't want to wait. I don't want to think about the long term. Give me something pleasant immediately." This voice is not evil. It's just hungry. And if you ignore it completely, it will scream louder. It will find ways to distract you, to pull you into unskillful behaviors, to make you miserable until you give it what it wants. So what do? You offer it something better. You give it a taste of happiness that's immediate but also harmless. This is one of the reasons the Buddha taught the practice of concentration. When you learn to settle the mind on the breath, when you learn to make the breath comfortable, you're creating a pleasure that doesn't depend on external things. It's right here, right now, available at any moment. And this pleasure speaks directly to that voice that wants instant gratification. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this principle. There was once a merchant who had 3 sons. He was getting old and wanted to pass on his business to the one who was most capable. So he gave each son a bag of silver coins and said, "Go into the world and trade. In 1 year, return and show me what you've accomplished." The first son took his coins and bought expensive goods. He traveled to a distant city where he hoped to sell them for a great profit. But on the way, his caravan was attacked by bandits, and he lost everything. He returned home empty-handed and ashamed. The second son was more cautious. He buried his coins in the ground, where they would be safe. At the end of the year, he dug them up and returned them to his father. He had lost nothing, but he had gained nothing either. The third son took his coins and bought simple goods, things people needed every day. He traveled from village to village, trading slowly, about building relationships. He didn't make a huge profit, but he made a steady one. At the end of the year, he returned with twice as many coins as he started with. The father looked at the 3 sons. He said to the first, "You were brave but reckless. You sought great gain but ignored the dangers." He said to the second, "You were safe but lazy. You preserved what you had but created nothing new." And he said to the third, "You were wise. You understood that steady, patient effort yields more than either recklessness or fear." This story is about how we approach the inner negotiation. The voice of desire is like the first son, it wants big, immediate pleasure and doesn't care about the risks. The voice of fear is like the second son, it wants to play it safe, to avoid all risk, even if that means missing out on genuine happiness. But the wise voice, the voice you're trying to cultivate, is like the third son. It understands that steady, patient effort, offering the mind small but genuine pleasures along the way, is the path to real wealth. So how do you cultivate this wise voice? How do you learn to offer the mind something better than its usual junk food? It starts with the breath. The breath is always here. It's always available. And it's incredibly versatile. You can adjust it. You can lengthen it, shorten it, deepen it, soften it. You can imagine the breath energy flowing to different parts of the body. You can experiment and see what feels good. This is where directed thought and evaluation come in, 2 of the factors of concentration. Directed thought is the ability to aim your mind at a skillful object. You choose to focus on the breath instead of on a distracting thought. Evaluation is the ability to investigate. You look at the breath and ask, is this comfortable? Could it be more comfortable? What happens if I breathe this way instead of that way? When you do this, something interesting happens. The mind begins to settle. It finds a sense of ease, a sense of pleasure. This is the third factor, rapture, a kind of energy and interest that arises when you find a good object. And with that rapture comes a deeper sense of well-being, the fourth factor, which we simply call pleasure. These factors are not just abstract concepts. They're real experiences you can cultivate. And when you cultivate them, you're giving the mind something it genuinely wants. You're feeding the hungry voices with good food. But here's the thing. Even when you offer this good food, some voices will still complain. They want entertainment. They want variety. They want the old, familiar distractions. This is where you need additional negotiation strategies. Let me tell you another story. This one is about a cook. There was once a cook who worked in the palace of a great king. He was known for his ability to prepare dishes that pleased the king's palate. But one day, the king grew tired of his cooking. He sent for the cook and said, "Your food no longer satisfies me. If you cannot prepare something that delights me, you will be dismissed." The cook was distressed. He had used all his best recipes. He didn't know what else to try. He went to consult an old woman who lived near the palace gates. She was known for her wisdom. The old woman listened to his problem and then said, "You have been trying to please the king with your dishes. But you haven't been paying attention to the king himself. Watch him. Notice when he eats with appetite and when he eats without interest. Notice what makes him smile and what makes him frown. Then let his responses guide you." The cook did as she said. He began to watch the king closely. He noticed that the king ate more heartily when the food was simple and fresh. He noticed that elaborate dishes often left the king feeling heavy and dull. So the cook simplified his cooking. He used fresh ingredients and simple preparations. And the king was delighted. This story is about paying attention to the mind's actual responses. When you're negotiating with your inner voices, you can't just use the same approach every time. You have to watch and see what works. Sometimes the mind needs a gentle breath. Sometimes it needs a more energetic one. Sometimes it needs to reflect on a particular theme, like the impermanence of the body, or the nature of anger, or the drawbacks of sensual indulgence. The Buddha gave many themes for reflection. They're not meant to make you feel guilty or afraid. They're meant to help you see things clearly, to weaken the unskillful voices and strengthen the skillful ones. For example, when the voice of lust arises, you can reflect on the body. Not in a disgusted way, but in a clear-eyed way. You can ask yourself, what am I really craving? Is it this body, or is it an image I've constructed in my mind? You can contemplate the 32 parts of the body: hair, teeth, skin, bones, internal organs. And see that what we crave is often a fantasy, not a reality. When the voice of anger arises, you can reflect on the costs of anger. You can ask, does this anger protect me, or does it burn me? Does it help the situation, or does it make things worse? You can think about how anger feels in the body, the tension, the heat, the tightness, and ask yourself if this is really what you want to carry around. When the voice of fear arises, you can reflect on the nature of fear itself. You can see that fear is just a mental state. It arises, it stays for a while, and then it passes. You don't have to act on it. You don't have to believe its stories. You can just watch it come and go. Let me tell you a story about a man who learned to do this. There was a man who was terrified of public speaking. Whenever he had to speak in front of a group, his heart would race, his palms would sweat, and his mind would go blank. He tried everything to overcome his fear, but nothing worked. One day, he heard a teaching about mindfulness. The teacher said, when fear arises, don't try to push it away. Don't try to fight it. Just observe it. Notice where it is in your body. Notice how it feels. Notice what thoughts accompany it. Just watch, without getting involved. The man decided to try this the next time he had to speak. When the fear arose, he didn't fight it. He simply observed it. He noticed the tightness in his chest. He noticed the racing thoughts. He noticed how the fear wanted him to run away. But he didn't run. He just watched. And something remarkable happened. The fear didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling him. He could feel it and still speak. He could observe it and still function. Over time, the fear grew weaker. It still appeared, but it no longer paralyzed him. This is the power of wise reflection. You don't have to eliminate the unskillful voices. You just have to stop believing them so completely. You have to see them for what they are, passing mental events, not eternal truths. Now, let's talk about priorities. In any negotiation, you have to know what you really want. If you don't know your own priorities, you'll be swayed by every voice that speaks. The Buddha's priorities are clear. He says that genuine happiness, the kind that doesn't depend on conditions, is possible. And he says that the path to that happiness is worth more than any temporary pleasure the world can offer. But you have to decide for yourself. You have to ask, what do I really want? Do I want the quick hits of pleasure that leave me empty afterward? Or do I want a deeper, more reliable kind of well-being? This is not a question you answer once and for all. It's a question you answer moment by moment, choice by choice. Every time you sit to meditate, you're answering it. Every time you choose patience over anger, generosity over greed, kindness over indifference, you're answering it. Let me tell you one more story. This one is about a king and a gem. There was a king who owned a magnificent gem. It was the most beautiful gem in the world, clear and bright, with a pure light that seemed to come from within itself. The king loved this gem more than anything he owned. One day, a thief stole the gem. The king was devastated. He sent his soldiers throughout the kingdom to find it. After many months, they found the thief and recovered the gem. But when the king looked at it, he was distressed. The gem was covered in dirt and grime. It no longer shone with its inner light. The king took the gem to the royal jeweler. The jeweler said, "This gem is not damaged. It's just covered with mud. It needs to be cleaned." So the jeweler carefully washed the gem, and as the dirt came off, the inner light began to shine again. Soon the gem was as beautiful as ever. The king learned something from this. He learned that the gem's light had never gone away. It had just been obscured. His job was not to create the light, but to remove what covered it. This is exactly how it is with the mind. The peace you're looking for is already there. The wisdom you're looking for is already there. It's not something you have to build from scratch. It's something you have to uncover by removing everything that obscures it. And what obscures it? The voices. The shoulds. The cravings. The fears. The stories. All of these are like mud covering a clear gem. Your job is not to add more mud. Your job is to gently wash it away. But washing takes time. It takes patience. It takes the willingness to keep coming back, day after day, even when the mud seems thick and stubborn. And it takes the wisdom to know that the light is still there, even when you can't see it. So as you continue this practice, remember the art of negotiation. Offer the restless voices something better. Watch them with wise attention. Know your priorities. And trust that the light is there, waiting to be uncovered. In our next session, we'll talk about the struggle itself, why it's necessary, why it's valuable, and how to relate to it in a way that doesn't exhaust you but strengthens you instead. Thank you for listening. May you find the wisdom to negotiate skillfully with every voice that arises. May you taste the pleasure of a settled mind. And may you trust in the light that's always there, even when the mud seems thick. In our previous sessions, we sat with the inner committee and learned the art of negotiation. We discovered that we can offer the restless voices something better than their usual junk food, a genuine sense of well-being that comes from settling the mind on the breath. We learned that wisdom is the ability to talk ourselves into what's genuinely good and out of what only seems good in the moment. But if you've been practicing, you've probably noticed something. The negotiation doesn't always go smoothly. Some voices are stubborn. Some days the mind settles easily, other days it feels like a war zone. And this brings us to a topic that often gets glossed over in discussions of Buddhism, the reality of struggle. We hear about peace and compassion and enlightenment, and we start to imagine that the path is all smooth sailing. But if you read the accounts of the monks and nuns in the early Buddhist texts, you see a different picture. In the Therigatha and Therigatha, the verses of the elder monks and nuns, you find stories of struggle. You find people who wrestled for years with lust, with anger, with doubt. You find people who felt like giving up. You find people who wept as they practiced. The Buddha himself acknowledged this. He said that some people practiced the holy life with tears streaming down their faces. But he also said that it's better to hold on, even then, because in the long run, you'll be glad you did. This is an important teaching. It's a reminder that struggle is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're engaged in something real. If the practice were easy, everyone would be enlightened. The fact that it's difficult means that it's valuable. Let me tell you a story about a monk who struggled. This is a story from the time of the Buddha, though I've adapted it slightly. There was a young monk named Vakali. He was deeply devoted to the Buddha. In fact, he was so devoted that he couldn't stop gazing at the Buddha's physical form. He would sit and stare at the Buddha for hours, filled with joy just from looking at him. He neglected his own practice because he was so caught up in this devotion. One day, the Buddha called him and said, "Vakali, what good is this decaying body of mine? Whoever sees the Dhamma sees me. Whoever sees me sees the Dhamma. Go and practice." Vakali was crushed. He felt that he had failed. He went into the mountains, determined to practice, but his mind was filled with doubt and self-reproach. He climbed to the top of a cliff, thinking that if he couldn't make progress, he would throw himself off. The Buddha, knowing what was in Vakali's mind, appeared to him in a vision and spoke words of encouragement. Vakali's heart was lifted. He applied himself to practice with new energy, and soon after, he attained awakening. This story is not just about Vakali. It's about all of us. There are times when the practice feels impossible. There are times when we want to give up. But if we can hold on, if we can find even a small thread of encouragement, something can shift. The struggle itself becomes the path. Think of it like training a wild animal. The mind is like a wild elephant. It's been running free for a long time, doing whatever it wants, going wherever it pleases. When you first try to tame it, it's going to resist. It's going to trumpet and stomp and try to break free. It might even hurt you. But if you're patient and persistent, if you keep coming back with kindness and firmness, eventually it learns to follow your lead. It learns to be still. The struggle is not the enemy. The struggle is the process. And if you can learn to relate to it skillfully, it becomes a source of strength. Let me tell you another story. This one is about a sculptor. There was once a sculptor who was known for his ability to carve beautiful figures out of marble. One day, a young man came to him and asked, "How do you create such beautiful things from a block of stone?" The sculptor said, "I don't create anything. The figure is already in the stone. I just remove everything that isn't the figure." This is a helpful way to think about the practice. The peace you're looking for is already there. The wisdom you're looking for is already there. It's not something you have to build from scratch. It's something you have to uncover by removing everything that obscures it. And what obscures it? The voices. The shoulds. The cravings. The fears. The stories. All of these are like layers of stone covering the figure underneath. Your job is not to add more stone. Your job is to chip away at what's already there. But here's the tricky part. Some of those layers are very hard. They've been there for a long time. They've become familiar. They feel like part of you. And when you start to chip them away, it can be uncomfortable. It can even be painful. This is where patience comes in. Patience is not just waiting. It's a kind of endurance. It's the willingness to stay with the process even when it's difficult. It's the understanding that some things take time. The Buddha often compared the practice to the work of a farmer. A farmer doesn't pull on the crops to make them grow faster. That would just kill them. A farmer prepares the soil, plants the seeds, provides water and sunlight, and then waits. The growth happens on its own timetable. In the same way, you can't force the mind to be peaceful. You can't force it to be wise. You can only create the conditions. You practice generosity, because that softens the heart. You practice virtue, because that creates a foundation of trust. You practice meditation, because that steadies the mind. And then you wait. You trust the process. But waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. It means continuing to do the work, day after day, without getting caught up in the results. It means showing up for your practice even when it feels like nothing is happening. It means trusting that the seeds you're planting will bear fruit in their own time. Let me tell you a story about a gardener. This is a story from my own experience, though I've changed a few details. There was a man who lived next to a temple. He had a small garden where he grew vegetables. Every day, he would water his plants and pull out the weeds. He did this with great care and attention. But one year, there was a drought. The plants stopped growing. The man kept watering them, but nothing seemed to help. He became discouraged. One day, a monk from the temple came to visit him. The man complained about his garden. He said, "I've done everything right, but nothing is growing. What's the point of all this work?" The monk looked at the garden. Then he looked at the man. He said, "The point is not just the harvest. The point is the care you give. The plants may not be growing now, but the soil is being prepared. The roots are going deeper. When the rain comes, your garden will be stronger than it was before." The man didn't fully understand, but he kept watering. And when the rains finally came, his garden flourished beyond anything he had imagined. This story is about the unseen work of practice. When you meditate, when you reflect on the Dhamma, when you try to be more mindful in your daily life, you're not always going to see immediate results. But something is happening underneath. The mind is being prepared. The roots are going deeper. And when the conditions are right, the growth will come. Now, let's talk about one of the most persistent voices in the inner committee, the voice of doubt. This is the voice that says, "This isn't working. You're not cut out for this. Maybe you should try something else." It's a very clever voice. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like it's on your side. But it's really just another obstacle. The Buddha recognized doubt as one of the 5 hindrances, the mental states that block concentration and insight. And he had a very practical approach to dealing with it. He said that when doubt arises, you should look into it. Ask yourself, what exactly am I doubting? Am I doubting the teacher? Am I doubting the teaching? Am I doubting my own ability? And then, instead of getting lost in the doubt, you can investigate. For example, if you doubt your own ability, you can look at your actual experience. Have you ever had a moment of peace in meditation? Have you ever had a moment of clarity? If so, then you know that peace and clarity are possible for you. The doubt is just a thought. It's not a fact. If you doubt the teaching, you can test it. The Buddha didn't ask for blind faith. He said, "Come and see for yourself." So take one small aspect of the teaching. Maybe the idea that generosity leads to happiness, and test it in your own life. Give something away and see how it feels. You don't have to believe the whole path at once. You just have to take one step and see where it leads. This is a very empowering way to work with doubt. Instead of being paralyzed by it, you use it as a motivation to investigate. You turn doubt into a kind of curiosity. And curiosity is a much more helpful state of mind. Let me tell you a story about a student and a teacher. This is a story that's been told in many traditions, but it applies here. A student came to a teacher and said, "I have so many doubts. I doubt the path. I doubt myself. I doubt that peace is possible. What should I do?" The teacher said, "Tomorrow morning, go to the river and bring me a cup of water. But don't use a cup. Use your hands. The student was confused. How can I bring water in my hands? It will just slip through my fingers. The teacher said, try it and see. The next morning, the student went to the river. He cupped his hands and tried to carry water back to the teacher. But by the time he reached the teacher's hut, his hands were empty. He tried again and again, with the same result. Finally, he returned to the teacher and said, it's impossible. The water always slips away. The teacher said, you're right. It is impossible to carry water in your hands. But if you want to bring water from the river, you don't carry it in your hands. You use a pot. In the same way, you can't carry the teaching in your doubts. Doubts are like your hands, they let everything slip through. But if you set aside your doubts, even for a moment, you create a vessel that can hold the water. And in that moment, you taste it. The student understood. He stopped trying to resolve his doubts and simply practiced. And in the practice, he found what he was looking for. This story points to an important truth: doubt is not resolved by thinking. It's resolved by direct experience. You can't think your way out of doubt any more than you can carry water in your hands. But if you set doubt aside and actually practice, you taste something real. And that taste is more convincing than any argument. Now, let's talk about the role of the body in all of this. Sometimes we think of meditation as purely a mental activity. But the body is deeply involved. The voices in your head are not just abstract thoughts, they have physical correlates. Fear tightens the chest. Anger heats the face. Desire creates a kind of reaching, grasping sensation in the hands and mouth. When you practice mindfulness, you can learn to notice these physical sensations. And when you notice them, you can work with them directly. You can breathe into the tightness. You can soften around the heat. You can observe the reaching without acting on it. This is another way to negotiate with the voices. You're not just talking to them, you're working with their physical manifestations. And often, when the body softens, the mind softens too. Let me tell you a story about a warrior. This story is a metaphor for the inner battle, but it carries a powerful truth. There was once a warrior who was known for his courage in battle. He had never been defeated. But one day, he was captured by his enemies. They threw him into a dark pit and left him there. At first, he struggled. He tried to climb the walls, but they were too steep. He tried to dig his way out, but the ground was too hard. After days of struggling, he became exhausted. He lay at the bottom of the pit, convinced that he would die there. But then he had a thought. He remembered something his teacher had told him long ago: the enemy you face outside is nothing compared to the enemy inside. If you can defeat the enemy inside, no outside enemy can touch you. So he stopped struggling against the walls of the pit. Instead, he began to struggle against his own despair. He struggled against his own fear. He struggled against the voice that told him he was defeated. And in that struggle, he found a new kind of strength. He found a stillness that no pit could contain. Days later, his friends found him and pulled him out. They asked him how he had survived. He said, "I stopped fighting the pit and started fighting my mind. And once I won that battle, the pit didn't matter anymore." This story is about the real battleground. The external circumstances of your life may be difficult. You may face loss, illness, disappointment, betrayal. But the real battle is always with your own mind. And if you can win that battle, no external circumstance can truly defeat you. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to suffering. It means you're no longer overwhelmed by it. You can feel pain without being consumed by it. You can face loss without losing yourself. You can be with difficulty without adding the extra layer of mental anguish that makes it so much worse. The Buddha called this the second arrow. The first arrow is the physical pain, the loss, the difficult circumstance. That arrow is going to hit you, it's part of being human. But the second arrow is the one you shoot yourself. It's the story you tell about the pain, the resistance, the fear, the self-pity. That arrow is optional. And with practice, you can learn not to shoot it. This is what the warrior in the pit discovered. He couldn't change the pit. But he could change his relationship to it. He could stop shooting himself with arrows of despair and fear. And in that stopping, he found a freedom that the pit could not touch. So as you continue your practice, remember the reality of struggle. It's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're engaged in something real. The mind is like a wild elephant, like a block of stone, like a garden in drought. It takes time, patience, and persistent effort to transform it. But transformation is possible. The elephant can be tamed. The figure can be revealed. The garden can flourish. Not because you force it, but because you create the conditions and then trust the process. In our final session, we'll bring all of this together. We'll talk about the positive side of heedfulness, the recognition that every moment is an opportunity. We'll talk about the Buddha's last words and what they mean for us today. And we'll end with a reflection on how to carry this practice into every aspect of your life. Thank you for listening. May you find the strength to stay with the struggle. May you trust the unseen work. And may you discover that the peace you seek is already there, waiting to be uncovered. We've traveled a long road together. We've sat with the inner committee and learned to observe the voices without immediately jumping in. We've practiced the art of negotiation. We've faced the reality of struggle and discovered that the battle itself can become the path. Now, in this final session, we bring it all together. We turn to the positive side of heedfulness, the recognition that every moment is an opportunity. If you could boil the entire practice down to one word, that word would be heedfulness. Appamada. The Buddha said that all skillful qualities have their foundation in heedfulness. And even his last words were about this quality: subject to decay are all conditioned things. Strive on with heedfulness. When we hear the word heedfulness, we tend to think of its negative side. Watch out. Be careful. Danger ahead. And that's part of it. But there's another side that rarely gets mentioned. Heedfulness is also about recognizing opportunity. It's about seeing that in any given moment, even a moment as small as one breath, you have the power to do something skillful. The Thai language captures this beautifully. The Pali word for heedlessness, appamada, became the Thai word pramat, which means to underestimate. So when you're heedless, you're underestimating something. You might underestimate the dangers you face. Or you might underestimate your own potential. Heedfulness, then, is the opposite of underestimating. It's not underestimating the dangers, and it's also not underestimating yourself. You have capacities you haven't yet developed. You have strengths you haven't yet discovered. And with practice, you can bring them out. Let me tell you a story about a monk who understood this. There was a monk named Ajahn Mun, one of the great meditation masters of 20th century Thailand. In his final talk, he compared the practice to going into battle. He said that discernment is the weapon. Concentration is the food. And the soldier is the determination not to come back and be the laughingstock of the defilements ever again. Think about that image. The defilements. Greed, aversion, delusion, have been making a fool of you for a long time. They promise happiness and deliver suffering. They've had you chasing one thing after another. But now, here's your chance to put an end to that. Here's your chance to fight for freedom. This is the positive side of heedfulness. It's not just about avoiding danger. It's about seizing an opportunity. It's about recognizing that you have something precious, this human life, this chance to practice, and not wasting it. The Buddha encouraged his monks to reflect on death with every breath. This sounds morbid, but it's actually the opposite. It's about recognizing that you may only have this one breath. And in that one breath, you can do a lot. You can generate kindness. You can let go of a grudge. You can simply be present. This attitude brings you back to the only moment that matters, right now. Let me tell you a story about a woman who learned this lesson. There was a woman diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctors told her she might only have a few months to live. At first, she was devastated. But then something shifted. She realized that she didn't know how much time she had. None of us do. The only difference was that she now knew she didn't know. She started to live differently. She paid attention to small things, the warmth of the sun, the taste of food, the sound of her grandchildren's laughter. She stopped putting things off. She made peace with people she had been avoiding. And in doing so, she discovered a richness in life she had never noticed before. Her illness didn't go away. But her relationship to life changed completely. She became heedful in the deepest sense, not from fear, but from appreciation. This is what heedfulness looks like in daily life. It's about recognizing that every moment, every breath, is an opportunity to come back to yourself, to choose a skillful response, to cultivate the qualities that lead to peace. Now let's talk about how to carry this practice into every aspect of your life. The Buddha didn't teach meditation as something separate from daily life. He taught it as a way of living. The same qualities you develop on the cushion can be applied to everything you do. When you're at work, you can practice patience. When you're with family, you can practice kindness. When difficulties arise, you can practice equanimity. Every situation is an opportunity to cultivate a skillful quality. Let me tell you a story about a bus driver. There was a bus driver who drove the same route every day. He picked up the same people, saw the same streets. It was monotonous, and he often felt bored and restless. One day, he heard a teaching about mindfulness. He decided to try something new. Instead of just going through the motions, he started paying attention. He noticed the way light fell on different streets. He noticed the faces of passengers. He noticed his own reactions, the impatience when someone was slow, the irritation when traffic was heavy. And as he noticed, something shifted. The boredom lifted. He was still driving the same route, but it felt completely different. He had discovered that mindfulness transforms everything. It turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. This is available to you right now, in whatever you're doing. You don't need to change your circumstances. You just need to change your attention. The Buddha's last words were an encouragement. Strive on with heedfulness. He wasn't giving a warning. He was giving a gift. He was saying, you have the capacity. You have the tools. Now use them. And the tools are simple. The breath is available. The body is available. The mind is available. You don't need anything else. You just need to pay attention. Let me leave you with one final story. A student asked his teacher, "What is the most important moment in practice?" The teacher said, "This one." The student asked, "What is the most important teaching?" The teacher said, "This one." The student asked, "What is the most important teacher?" The teacher said, "This one." The student was confused. He said, "I don't understand." The teacher said, "The past is gone. The future hasn't arrived. The only moment you ever have is this one. The only teaching that matters is the one you're applying right now. And the only teacher who can help you is the awareness you bring to this moment. Everything else is just a story." This is the heart of the practice. Not some far-off enlightenment. Not some special state. Just this moment, met with awareness, met with kindness, met with the determination to do what's skillful. So as you go forward, carry this with you: the inner war is real, but so is the possibility of peace. The voices are many, but so are the skillful responses. And in every breath, you have a new opportunity to choose wisely. Don't underestimate what you can do in a single moment of awareness. Don't underestimate the power of one mindful breath. These small moments add up. They shape your life. They shape your mind. The Buddha said that even if you live 100 years without heedfulness, it's not as valuable as a single day lived with it. Because a single day of heedfulness can change everything. It can open doors you didn't know existed. It can reveal a freedom that was always there, waiting to be uncovered. So strive on. Not with tension, but with the steady, patient effort of a gardener who trusts that the seeds will grow. Show up for your practice day after day. Offer the restless voices something better. Trust the unseen work. And know that the peace you seek is already here, hidden beneath the layers of distraction, waiting for you to uncover it. Thank you for walking this path with me. May your practice be steady. May your heart be open. And may you find the freedom that comes from knowing your own mind. This is Monk's Temple, reminding you that every breath is an opportunity. Don't miss it.